Hello and welcome back to another Instagram Live and Artist Stories with Loud Art Society. I'm Tara Bahal, founder of Loud Art Society. Loud Art Society is an organization that is nonprofit and is meant to enhance health through art and creativity. We are operating in the city of Calgary and we have been founded since the year 2015. Today we have a very interesting guest, a very talented photographer, Donovan, and I think he just joined us. I'm just going to ask him to us and we start our conversation right away. Hello, Eric.
Does that work?
Do you have my voice, Eric? Can you hear me? Oh, I think something is going on with your camera. Eric, we don't have your voice or your video. The video has stopped. Okay, now we have you, but it still stopped.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty.
Eric, would you like to just exit and then enter again? And I think maybe that would help.
It's something's not working. It's can you hear me?
Your voice is cutting off.
Yeah, there's something. I'm gonna leave. And can you invite me again?
Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Let's try again. This time it's going to work. Okay, I'm just waiting for him to join us again. So while I'm waiting for Eric to join back again, thank you very much for everyone who has joined us this morning, by the way. Thanks for all of your support, all of the great feedback and comments that you leave for us. And our apologies if we don't get back to them as quick and as fast as possible, but we do read them. Thank you very much for all the love that you send to us. Let me see if he's back. Not yet. I would really appreciate if you could also follow us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do have two YouTube channels. One is Louder Society, where all of these talks with artists and their stories are being shared in both languages, the Persians and English ones. And the other one is our educational content is being spread out on it calls, excuse me, Hezarik Shab. 1001 Night, and we are having mostly cooking education and cooking videos. And some of these videos from this Instagram live is also being shared on that channel as well. Okay, I'm still waiting for Eric to join us again. I hope that he can find the way back. But yes, it would be very kind of you if you could subscribe to our YouTube channels as well and follow us on YouTube. And let's see. No, Eric is still not here. I think I might need to end all here. Here is Eric. Okay.
Does
Hi,
that
Eric.
work? Does that work?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I have no idea what was going on there. So that's I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no worries. I think all is working now. Just give me a second. I need to fix this. Now that we have all the technical difficulties. All right. Okay. Okay, this is good. All right, let's get started, Eric. Thank you very much for joining us. Please go ahead, introduce yourself for us. Tell us about yourself, which city you're living in, and what kind of art do you make?
Okay, well, my name is Eric Donovan. I live in Calgary, in Canada, and professionally, I'm a scientist. I'm a physicist, and my research group takes images of the Northern Lights. That's what we do, and we use those images to study things that happen in the region of space around the Earth. And then, as an aspiring artist, I hesitate to call myself an artist, but as an aspiring artist, I am a photographer, and I do photographic art and mixed media stuff with photographs.
So how come did you started making photographs or taking photographs? What happened?
So this is I think it's relevant for Loud Art Society, okay, because it has to do with mental health, I think. And it's maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I didn't know it at the time. I could feel things weren't going well in my life, personally. And what really was happening was my marriage was falling apart, right? You know, after 15 years. And I found myself, I think I was depressed in a way, or not in a way, I think I was depressed. And every day I got into this habit of, you know, I'd gotten a research prize at work, and I'd gotten $1,000, you know, I just got this check for $1,000 for this award I got. And I thought, I don't know why, because I'd now ever been into photography, but I bought a camera with that $1,000, you know, and I found myself going out every morning, and I was thinking about things, and I was going on these long walks every single morning, like 40 minutes, half an hour, whatever, day after day after day after day over the course of a couple of years. And I was walking around Calgary, sort of around campus, because I would do this before I came into work, and I just started taking photographs, and I started taking a lot of photographs, and I started to notice that in my photos, I was starting to imagine that I could see the mood that I was in the photographs that I was taking. And there was that aspect of it. Another aspect of it was, I thought I was starting to think I was taking some pretty good photographs, like some interesting photographs. And I was taking photographs of things like, you know, I mean, I travel a lot, and I take photographs of places I go, beaches, mountains, whatever, and my son, when I'm traveling with my son. And, you know, and those are not what I think of as my artistic practice. That's just a record of my life, you know, not just, but it's the record of my life. And what I was finding walking around the area around the university was, I was going down back alleys and walking around industrial areas and stuff like this. And I was finding I could actually capture some pretty interesting and beautiful photographs of remarkably unremarkable things, right? You know, and so there was this kind of idea of trying to create beauty and capture nature in the city on one hand, and the other part was that I was finding it sort of, as I said to you earlier, I was finding it self-therapeutic. Like I was feeling better. Just the more I created, I was feeling better, and on top of that, I was sort of exploring how I was feeling with the images. And that was, I think, about 6 years ago. And then, you know, in the intervening years, I've just developed as a photographer, and that practice has changed, but it's all rooted in that.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful story that you have. So, I guess my next question was that if you believe that your art practice had any effect on your health overall, and I think you said it beautifully.
Well, I think it's had a kind of like I would say a multifaceted effect on my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, it's helped me through some difficult times, you know, and it's so rather than just walking around and kind of moping around and feeling sorry for myself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking around and I'm taking images and thinking about what I'm creating, and then thinking about how I'm feeling, and how I'm feeling is affecting what I'm creating, right? You know, and then on top of that, I've you know, I've gotten to the point now where, you know, wherever I go, I'll go on, you know, 4-hour, 5-hour walks, right? You know, and I was just on the west coast of Vancouver Island a month ago, and I went to Long Beach 3 times, I guess, over that time. And I went on, you know, 6-hour walks on Long Beach, and I was taking really, I think, interesting photographs of logs that washed up on the beach, and you know, patterns in the waves and so on, right? And so it's given me, because I don't like hiking, you know, it's given me a reason to get out, right? You know. And then the third thing is, I just saw an art talk last night with Exposure Calgary. And it was a photographer from Montreal, and he had put some words on things that I thought made sense for me, which is I've also started to get into taking photographs of people, right? And there's an intimacy to that, right? And there's a you know, you develop a relationship with that person, that you either change your relationship with that person, or you sort of explore how you feel about that person, or you get to know that person a little bit. And so I think it's changed a little bit about the way I interact with people too.
Wow, that's great. That's very interesting. So, what would you say that is the theme of your artworks, or does it even have a theme to you?
So there's definitely a theme. Okay, so I like I did a for, you know, in February every year in Calgary, there's the Exposure Photography Festival, and Exposure offers a portfolio review. So you can sign up, and then you get 5 prominent photography experts in Calgary who will review your work. Donna Schwartz is one of them. She's a professor in fine arts, you know, here, and I do not recommend people do this if they have a thin skin, right? Because it's pretty brutal, right? You know, because they are experts, and they are trying to help, right? Yeah. And they help by saying, you're wasting your time with this, you know, this is garbage, but here's the good, you know, sort of thing. And I felt this year I did it, and I brought 25 images, and all 5 of my reviewers said they got what I was getting at, right, with my work. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to capture emotion and use an image of something to convey something deeply emotional and personal to me, you know. And one of the reviewers, in fact, I felt really good, because one of the reviewers who owns Resolve Photo down in the south of Calgary, he had said something extraordinarily positive about how my images actually made him feel. He didn't mean a certain way. He just said he looked at them and he felt things looking at my photos. So everything that I'm trying to do is it's not to make a beautiful image. It's to convey something emotional.
Nice.
You know. And
so, I know that you have shared some of your works with me, but and I will post them after this live. But if you have any of them, you know, already at hand, I would really appreciate if you could show us one of the ones that you think particularly do capture emotions.
So it's funny, because I just so happen to have some of my pieces right here, you know? and so I don't know if you can see this, but this is a kind of a strange photograph, and it's a photograph of my son, whom I dearly love, my 15-year-old, but he was 13 at this time, and his situation. So this is my son holding a fidget spinner that's spinning. Okay. And he's classified as Asperger's. I mean, he's on the very, very light end of that. He's a lovely, wonderful, smart, beautiful boy, and he fidgets a lot, right? Like, he fidgets a lot. It's just in his character. It's in his nature. And he went through this phase where he couldn't exist in the world if he wasn't holding and playing with a fidget spinner, right? You know, and I took that photograph on the platform of the Brentwood C train station, and he was playing with the fidget spinner, and I just was playing around with the exposure lengths, and I got this photograph, and as I say, it feels like you can see the motion, and it captures something, and people who don't understand the photo, they love the photo, and I love the photo and I understand the photo. I understand what the photo means to me, and it's very highly emotional. And another one I'll show you is I play around as I'm a physicist, and I work with images at work, right? And this is a photograph I took. There's the research park, which is near the university, and there's a pond in the research park. And I took a photograph of some reeds in the pond and a reflection. And then I used software that I have at work that I've written to take that image and make it into a polar image, like make it circular. And this is the place that I went to over and over and over and over again as I was going to work while I was kind of thinking about my life. And so this image captures that place and captures something about my work too, my professional work as well. Right. You know, so
it's a very interesting photo. So how many pieces would you say that you have created so far? Do you count them at all?
So I would say, depending, like it's really funny. I feel like a student, like I'm like a student again with the photography, right? So so when I if you ask me now, I would say I have 1,000 pieces. Right, you know, and I would be honest. I would be honest. Like I have a, you know, stacks of printouts, and I've worked with these. I basically probably spend, you know, an hour or an hour and a half every night on this. Right, like I'll before I go to bed, I'll sit down and I will do something with this. Right, and so, but then when I do something like the portfolio review. Like I sit down and I feel like I have nothing, right? You know, so you asked me to send some images, right? And it took me, like I was sitting going, well, I have nothing to show you, right? You know, and so I have a lot of images, but the body of work still needs work, you know, to get that to a point where I feel like I have 25 images that I'm really proud of and really happy with, you know.
I think it really doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter as long as you keep working on it and it's evolving. You know, it's ever evolving. As I, you know, we had a conversation just before this live. Is that, you know, work of artists is not always coming in one piece. I find that it's like puzzle pieces, and these puzzle pieces may take years to come together to actually create that one body of work that maybe tells all of the stories, all of those ideas that you're trying to convey to the viewer. And the patience is a big part of this process generally. So it's good that you have started and you're being very patient with yourself.
Well, and it's funny because again, I think this couples back to the idea of art and mental health in particular. That this has become, I think this is how I meditate.
Yes.
Right. I really do. I really believe that. And secondly, I've noticed, like when I started, like, you know, we have these SD cards now, right? You know, and you can just take, you've digital cameras, you can take 10,000 pictures. It takes nothing, right? You know, and so I was taking, I think the first year I took photographs, what I would do is I would take and fill up these 10,000 image subdirectories, right? And then like I'm on my 20th 10,000 image subdirectory, which means I'm on about my 200,000th photograph, right? And in the beginning, like if I look at my earlier subdirectories, if I go through them, I think there might be 5 images out of that 10,000 that I think I could work with and do something with. And now, and I was taking 10,000 like in 2 months, and then 10,000 in 2 months, and then 10,000 in 2 months, and so on, right? And now I have not taken 10,000 images in the last year and a half, right? Mm-hmm. But what I've noticed is that the fraction of images that I'm taking that I think are interesting is going up in time, right? Mm-hmm. And the rate that I'm taking photographs is going down in time, right? So I have more. So I've just really noticed that, there is a lot of. I don't feel like it's patience because it's just somehow woven into my life.
Mm-hmm. I think that you're also kind of intuitively working and self-taught, and so that your passion is carrying you through it. And the other thing is that I think after this much of practice that you do, your eyes become trained for what you're actually looking for. So you may not end up spending that much time capturing what you have in your mind or what you're seeing. You already know what you want, and you just make it happen.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Like I didn't used to, like I used to decide I'm going to take some photographs, right? Okay. You know, and now for me it's very different. Like I'm just kind of going through my life, and I think I have always a photographic eye, always, right? And so I'm driving down the road. Like I took a photograph in Medicine Hat last year that I really love, of this woman standing against a wall, right? And she was a flag person for a construction site, and she was dressed in this really bright red and orange clothing for safety. And then she was standing near a wall that had all this red and orange and black graffiti on it. And the sun was really bright, and she had this like super blonde hair, right? And I drove by her, and I remember I just pulled over, grabbed my camera, got out of the car, and went up to her and said, like I've got to take your picture with you leaning against that wall if it's okay with you. And she was quite happy to. And so I took like 30 or 40 photographs of her, and then I've used those to do some pieces, and the photo really worked. But I find myself I'm now I don't say I'm going to take photos at 1 o'clock, right? I say I'm just kind of going through my life, and I'm going to take this photo because I can see it right here, right now, that's going to be interesting for me.
That's the artist's mind. It's always running, and you're always looking for the ideas to just capture them, and don't let anything miss or lose any opportunity that you can have to capture that moment.
And I've also been kind of amazed because it feels weird. Like at first it felt really weird to walk up to somebody and say, I want to take a photograph of you up close. Right. But people are like, I've not had a single negative reaction by anybody. Right. And anywhere. I mean, I remember being on the subway in Beijing in China. I was there for work, and I was just on the subway, and there was this woman who had like really cool hair, and she had reflective sunglasses on, and like bright lipstick. And I said, can I take your photograph? And she happened to speak English, and she said, sure. And so I took, like, I was just between stations and taking photographs, and people were laughing, and it's that's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of fun. That's great. And it seems like you have a great attitude, so that helps a lot. So, Eric, my next question to you is that would you like to collaborate with other artists?
So I mean, absolutely. I have a friend in Medicine Hat. No, it's not Medicine Hat. Lethbridge. I have a friend in Lethbridge, and we've been taking, like, occasionally we'll get together and we take photographs of each other in amongst actually oddly large rocks, right? And so we do that. I have a friend on Vancouver Island who I take photographs of her, and she's a very artistic person. She's a pianist, but but we have this thing where we've been kind of working together for a couple of years, and that thread of photographs of her is kind of evolving in time, and then interestingly, oddly, my 15-year-old son last year said he wanted to do a collaboration, and so I I've been working with a photograph that he took with his iPad and a photograph that I took, actually, weirdly, in the elevator at the Canadian Space Agency headquarters outside of Montreal. And there was just an interesting pattern of reflected off the metal in the elevator wall. And Sean took a picture of something metal as well. And I've been working with juxtaposing those as a diptych. And that's been fun. And then I joined this, so exposure photography, I mean, it's Exposure Calgary, it's called. And it's a photographic organization that puts on the Exposure Festival every year. And during the pandemic, they've been trying to do some online things, and they started this thing called Exposure Studio. And they had people apply to join, and they took 25 people, and they put together 10 talks, 10 evening talks. There's one tonight at 6:30, one last night at 6, and they put together 10 talks where a prominent international artist, photographer speaks to and with us over the course of an hour and a half. And the idea there, and the reason why I joined, because I hate talks. I hate them. I can't stand them. Right? Like if I knew how many talks I was going to have to see in my life, I don't know if I would have become a scientist. Honestly, right? And honestly, artist talks are actually not that good. Right? Because I think there's this idea or sense that artists have of trying to present their work dispassionately, so they're not telling you how to feel. And what it means is, if a dispassionate talk is a boring talk for me, right? And so, but I joined this to see these 9 talks because the goal of it was that those 25 photographers then would form a collective afterwards, right? And I am certainly the least experienced photographer in that group. Certainly, like there's people who got a BFA in photography 25 years ago and have been working for 25 years as a photographer, right? And then there's my friend, a friend of mine who's one of them, and she's like she's got like 4 or 5 shows this year, and her work is fabulous. I love her work, and then there's me, but I joined because I wanted to be part of that collective, and then I believe that will lead to another level of collaboration for me. And there are a few, I've looked at the work of most of those 25 people now, and there are a few in there that I really want to work with. And there's also an artist on Vancouver Island named David Ellingson, whose work I've been following for a few years. And he and I have spoken, and he has some interest in working with me. Oddly, though, he wants to use our auroral data from our auroral imaging group, together with his images. And so collaboration, I think, is the next step for me.
That's great. That's really exciting. And so some of these people that you mentioned, do they have an Instagram page that we could go and take a look at in their artwork and photos?
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, like David Ellingson he's a very interesting photographer on Vancouver Island, and Julia Hajnowski in Calgary, who's I think she's going to be famous. Like I really do. Like she is a really interesting practice, and so I can send you a few of them and the Instagram pages, and you can just let people see that. And you can also go to Exposure, like the Exposure website. Right, so it's just Exposure Calgary, and so Exposure Studio is a program, and they're going to be putting information about all of us up on that webpage. So,
wow, that's very nice. All right, so my next question to you, Eric, is what is your perspective on art and creativity?
My perspective on art and creativity. So we were talking earlier, and and you expressed the thing that I think every artist, particularly people who go through art training when they're younger and then they want to become professional artists, right? That who needs art, right? You said that phrase earlier. You can kind of get depressed, you get kind of into your head and think, who needs this? And I've come to the conclusion that, like there's, Louis Riel, who was, you know who Louis Riel was?
No.
Because you're not from Canada, so I mean, you're Canadian now, I presume, but you grew up in Iran and Tajikistan, I believe, and Louis Riel was a Métis leader of an uprising in Manitoba in the 19th century. And then he was tried for treason and executed. And he most certainly was not a traitor, most certainly, right? You know, but he was fighting for what was right, right? And our country was extraordinarily unjust and continues to be so with many issues like that. But anyway, Louis Riel was tried, found guilty, and executed. And he made a statement to the jury before he was sentenced. And he said, our people are going to go to sleep for 100 years. And when we come back, it's going to be our artists who bring us back, right? And I feel that's not word for word, but that's the spirit of what he said, right? Mm-hmm. And I get choked up when I say that, actually. And the thing is, I think art is a representation of our soul. I think science is an expression, the expression of our desire to know, right? You know, and I'm reading a book with a friend of mine in Ontario. I've never done this before. Like we are both simultaneously reading the book, and then we'll talk once in a while on the phone about this book. And the book is called The Great Fire, and it's by an author named Shirley Hazard. And I heard Shirley Hazard on CBC Radio, like after she died. CBC Radio played a 1-hour interview with her, and she was just this fabulous. I was so fascinated by her as a person, and she was very old, and she was talking about when she was very young, living in Hong Kong before World War II, and her life there. And she was talking about the book The Great Fire. And so my friend and I are reading The Great Fire, and I'm finding, like, if I were to say who the 5 artists are who inspire me the most right now, Shirley Hazard has become one of those, because her ability to paint a picture with words is I've never read anything like this. Like it's amazing. I mean, it's like I feel like I'm in the room with these people, or I feel like I'm in the forest with these people, or I feel, you know, and it's I've never really experienced anything like it before, you know. And so I think art is like our soul, right? You know, and art is you know, it's a way of interpreting the world. You know, people look at something, and art is, you know, and so we are, you know, we are creative by biology, right? Like we are a creative species, like, and people are creative, and art is sort of the formal way of talking about that, right? You know, but it's much more than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. That was a very beautiful way that you put it. It was very beautifully said. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. So, what are you working on right now, artistically?
So I'm trying, like, so right now, I mean, I'm trying to learn how to use, like, so far, like, to work with images, I use, like, I've written tons of software over the years for my work, and so I'm good with working with images through my work, and so I've actually been playing around with that work software at night, you know, with my photographs. But I mean, clearly, there are programs like Photoshop and Procreate and other programs that are far superior to the tools that I've been using. And so I've been playing around the last 2 weeks, I've been playing around with this program Procreate, right? You know, and just trying to see how I can enhance the images that I take, or add something to the images that I take. And that's been a lot of fun. And then I've also been, I mean, I took like I've just taken like a lot of photographs of people in the last few years, and I've been playing around with those photographs of people more than other photographs, right? You know, and then on top of which I really would, I mean, I would like to think it's not an ego thing, but I would like to, because I've never shown my work in a formal setting, right? And I would like to have a show, right? You know, and so what I've been working on as well is thinking about, because, you know, you and I talked about this, I mean, it's thinking about, one can question whether or not this is the actually right, correct thing that the art world should do and should focus on. But you cannot advance in the art world unless you have a coherent, in quotations, coherent body of work, right? You know, and so you know, if you come in with 25 images and they're all beautiful images, but it's not coherent, that's a block to move into the next step, right? And so right now I'm working on trying to get the idea of a coherent body of work and to create a coherent body of work. And again, as a scientist, right, I have, we talked about this too, like I think science is just another form of art, right? And as a scientist, I've been a scientist now for more than 30 years, and I have a coherent body of work, and I'm successful partially, in part, because I have a coherent body of work. I've built on a theme for 30 years. And so I've got, like lots of stuff I can show on that theme, and I can always talk about that theme, right? And so I'm 6 years in as an amateur, part-time, at night as a photographer, and I'm working towards having the start of a coherent body of work. There's another thing too, which is along the theme of like I really have been thinking about science as art, right? You know, and I've been toying around with writing a book, right? And where it would be called the artist's statements of scientists, right? You know, and artist statements, like honestly, artist statements, they also drive me crazy. Like they like seriously, I think, you know, you just take some words that no one understands and throw in the word intimacy and you know and loss, and you have an artist statement, right? Like I don't get them. I do not get artist statements, right? And I've been working with Kathleen Ralph, who you interviewed before. Like she helped me. So I gave this talk on artist statements of scientists at the Nickel, and she helped me with artist statements, right? Because I thought, oh, this is easy, right? But I really have trouble with them, and so but I'm working on that too. I'm trying to you know, cast scientists as artists.
Nice. I have two questions now that you mentioned this. But before that, I'm gonna make some commentary about the artist statement. I think, yeah, I think, you know, when I was back in school and when I got out of school, what I was noticing a lot was that, you know, art is evolving as much as science is evolving, but people are following, you know, more or less what is happening in the science world, because technology is also kind of connected to it, and people need to get on board with that because they're using it more often in their daily life. But they don't notice when art is evolving. And that's why most of them are stuck with the mentality that art is that beautiful painting or that classical painting, you know, like it's still very much the perspective that the majority of people who are not involved in the arts world have as what art is. And then that same thing is kind of being projected on artist statements too, because we think as artists that we are evolving the art world and we are adding something new to it. I have to sound like someone who has some sort of discovery. There is this new thing that I have created, and it has to sound professional and highly academic. But most people cannot connect with that. They cannot understand what am I talking about. So we really need to simplify that. You know, we need to make it as simple as possible so everyone could understand. And there is a way to simplify literally anything to the point that a 5-year-old child could understand, a teenager could understand, and an adult person could understand. And then at the same time, you can make it in the most professional terminology for the most professional person in that field to understand it in all those terminologies. And that's something. Go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, it's really funny because I you were saying earlier while you were talking, you know, like my message to artists are, if you think people understand artist statements, you are terribly mistaken, right? like they just read like gibberish to people who aren't really trained artists, right? You know, and it's funny because like as a scientist, and one of my jobs that I did at the University of Calgary for 3 years was I was what they call Associate Dean for Research in the Faculty of Science, and I did these workshops on writing NSERC Discovery Grant applications. And in the NSERC Discovery Grant application, there is a plain language summary, right? And honestly, like for me, the plain language summary in the NSERC Discovery Grant is like the artist statement with a show, right?
Yeah.
And Belinda Hain, who's a friend of mine, she came and spoke about at one of these workshops about writing. One of the things she talked about was writing the plain language summary, and she summarized it. She said just what you said, like the plain language summary should be, something a child could read, a teenager could read, an adult can read, and your grandparents can read with no problem, right? And understand what it is you're trying to do and get across, right? So it's and also, it's funny, like art and science. It's interesting. I found an article there was a study, and I'm actually trying to find it again, but it's in this audiobook that is like 36 hours long that I've been listening to, and there was a point where the author of the book was saying that there had been a study back in the 1930s about the mind, the psychology of artists, of scientists, and of people who go into business. Okay. And what they found was that the mind of a scientist and the mind of an artist are actually very similar, and very different from the mind of somebody who's drawn into going into business, right? And that's one thing. Although some of the best art people I know are successful business people, but whatever, And then the other thing is, I've got this study that I bought this book called Creativity, and it's about creativity in art and science. And one article says, it's a study, a published study, and that they say is that people who are artists and scientists, both areas, people tend to be what people call polymaths, which means people who are deeply interested in a lot of things, right? And that on top of that a deep interest in art is a predictor of success in a scientist, and a deep interest in science is a predictor of success for an artist.
Very well said. I agree, actually. Yeah. Because even though I was making art, I still felt like something is missing. I need to do my own research.
Yes. Yes.
And I took it in my own hand, and I thought, it's not going to be done at school. I need to get out of school and get it into the community. This is not kind of research that I could just read books about it and write something about. So yeah, I very much agree with that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So the two questions that I have from you is, first of all, what is the subject, your scientific subject that you have published a lot?
So what I do is I study. It's not the northern. I mean, like my work is all around the northern lights. Okay. And what there's a field. It's called space physics in Canada, heliophysics in the United States. Doesn't matter. And what we do is we look at the way the sun and the Earth's magnetic field and the Earth's upper atmosphere interact, right? And so the aurora is a consequence of what we call the solar wind interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. And so what I do is I take images of the aurora, and I use that to that's sort of like my scientific instrument. The aurora is like my scientific instrument. And then I look at the aurora and use the aurora to tell me things about things that are going on a little bit further out in space. And I don't know, some people will know about this phenomenon. Have you heard of this phenomenon called Steve?
No.
No, okay. Well, but if you Google Eric Donovan Steve, right, just STEVE, you'll find like there's a lot of media interest in this thing that happened a few years ago where we discovered a new optical phenomenon in the night sky. And it's actually called Steve, and I see some of the people who've signed on are actually from the community that actually brought the Steve phenomenon to us, and it's fun because it's highly visual. Like we deal with a beautiful phenomenon, and it's we work with spacecraft and people who fly spacecraft and also the University of Calgary. There's 7 professors in our area at the University of Calgary, and it's an area that we really have some world leadership in, you know, and we have, I mean, there's a lot of great areas at U of C. I'm not saying there's not, but this is one of them. This is actually, and so it's a fun, dynamic work environment, and also, you know, it has taught me a lot how to, honestly, like, it's weird. I mean, photographs are just images. They're just like scientific images, and I've learned a lot about how images are by just doing my work over the years.
Yeah, so I guess it was part of your work anyway, like just that photography. It's just in a different way.
Yes, yes, and yeah, and also like our images, it's kind of interesting because they're taken by cameras that, you know, are, you know, like my cheaper camera now, you know, has like, you know, 4,000 by 6,000 pixels, right? You know, so our cameras, a lot of our cameras that we run for scientific purposes for the Aurora are 256 by 256 pixels, for instance, right? So they're actually not, they're not very nice images. And I have, you know, over the years though, like, cause, you know, when you write a paper and you put some of these images in the paper, you know, I've spent a lot of time making these not nice images look nice, right? You know, and so that's kind of, you know, in a sense, it's like, you know, you take a photograph and then you play with the exposure, and you play with the brightness, and you play with the shadows, and you know, it's very much like that. You know, sitting down and saying, like, how do I make the darker stuff here darker? How do I make the brighter stuff here brighter? How do I make the, you know, the you know, so that the image actually conveys the information that is in the image, you know, and so working with a photograph for artistic purposes feels actually no different from that.
Okay. That's really interesting. I'm very much interested to learn more about this. I'm sure I will talk more about this with you later on. But other question that I had, you know, you mentioned that you're taking photos from people too, but most of your photographs are quite abstract. Are you making the photos of people also in that same manner, like more abstract view,
Yes.
or your okay?
Yeah. No. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I can.
Yeah,
I have one here, and it looks. So this is a photograph. This is a photograph of my son.
Okay.
Right. You know, and so I none of my photographs are just a photograph. Okay. Right. None of them. I mean, I take you know, I don't know if I have another one here, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't have another one right here, but I mean, all of them are highly abstracted, you know, and I you know, for the exposure portfolio review, I took like 10 photographs of people and printed them on this really fine, like you can see it here. It's like, you can see it here. It's a really fine Chinese like rice paper that somebody, a friend of mine in Beijing, took me to this paper shop in Beijing one day last year, and I bought all kinds of paper for, like, you know, $3, right? You know, it's actually kind of amazing, you know, and I've played around with the printing the photos, and usually they're black and white, and printing them on this soft paper gives the photos a softness, right? Yes. And you know, and I've got, you know, like, some of the photographs are nudes, right? You know, and those are really interesting. And I usually, almost all of the photographs, especially the nude ones, almost all of the photographs I take are longer exposure, and I ask the person to move.
Okay.
Right. You know, so that there's kind of a life to it, right? You know, and so it's not, you know, like very, 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 very few of my photographs are just a photograph, right?
Interesting. That's very nice. So, I know that you're saying that you don't consider yourself as, like, professional yet, but however, you're still a few steps ahead from those people who haven't started any creative art at all. And part of what our organization is promoting is art education. And so my next question to you is, what is your recommendation for those people who just want to start and haven't started yet?
So, So it's funny, like a friend of mine, I was having a beer with a friend of mine about 3 years ago, I guess. I don't know, a while ago. And I was doing this photography. I was playing around with things, but I wasn't thinking of myself as having an artistic side. And she had said to me, well, something about my artistic side. And I said, well, I don't have an artistic side. Right. And then she's like, what are you talking about? Like, and then she kind of listed the ways that she had experienced me as being creative. Right. So I think, first of all, everybody is creative. Yes. Everybody. Right. And I have, I go to art galleries when I'm really fortunate at work before the pandemic, really fortunate at work to be able to travel because of what I do. I have one project that's unfolding over a decade with people in China and people in Europe and people in Montreal. And so that project, for that work, I have to go to China, I have to go to Spain, I have to go to Madrid. And so like in Madrid, we'll always have like an afternoon free or whatever, and I'll go to the Sofia Real, which is the big contemporary art museum in Madrid. And I've noticed that of late that I actually don't like anymore like classical art. Like I find it old and stuffy, and the sort of the group of seven stuff. I'm just not that interested in it anymore, and I love contemporary art. Like I love it, right? And contemporary art, one of the best things about contemporary art is you can be a contemporary artist without having technical skills.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But you cannot be a contemporary